Boxing. That the 1956 Summer Olympics took place in the new stadium at West Melbourne. A total number of 164 competitors entered from 35 nations, of whom 161 from 34 nations weighed in, and boxing was held 8 nights and 5 afternoons. The boxing schedule began on November 23 and ended on December 1. 10 boxing events were contested. Medal table. Flyweight. 19 participants from 19 nations. First round: Vladimir Stolnikov def. Edgar Basel on points. Terence Spinks def. Samuel Harris on points. Abel Laudonio def. Albert Ludic on points. Second round: Misha Dobrescu def. Federico Bonus on points. Ray Perez def. František Majdlok on points. John Caldwell def. Ye Shui on knockout. Warner Bachelor def. Henrik Kukia on points. Kenji Yonikura def. Fashan Muyangson on points. Rene Libia def. Pyo Hyanki on points. Vladimir Stolnikov def. Salvatore Baruni on points. Terence Spinks def. Abel Laudonio on points. Quarterfinals: Misha Dobrescu def. Ray Perez on points. John Caldwell def. Warner Bachelor on points. Rene Libia def. Kenji Yonikura on points. Terence Spinks def. Vladimir Stolnikov on points. Semi-finals: Misha Dobrescu def. John Caldwell on points. Terence Spinks def. Rene Libia on points. Final: Terence Spinks def. Misha Dobrescu on points. Bantamweight. 18 participants from 18 nations. First round: Song Soon Chun def. Alberto Adela PTS. Robert Barth def. Hempalajarius Uriya PTS. Second round: Frederick Gilroy def. Boris Stepanov Co. 3. Mario Citra def. Ahmed Rashid PTS. Owen Riley def. Daniel Helibike PTS. Wolfgang Berendt def. Henrik Gottesson Co. 2. Claudio Barrientos def. Zenon Stefaniuk PTS. Eda Jafra def. Thine Mind PTS. Carmelo Tomazelli def. Vichai Limcharan PTS. Song Soon Chung def. Robert Barth PTS. Quarterfinals: Frederick Gilroy def. Mario Citri PTS. Wolfgang Berendt def. Owen Riley PTS. Claudio Barrientos def. Eda Jafra PTS. Song Soon Chun def. Carmelo Tomazelli PTS. Semi-finals: Wolfgang Berendt def. Frederick Gilroy PTS. Song Soon Chun def. Claudio Barrientos PTS. Final: Wolfgang Berendt def. Song Soon Chun PTS. Featherweight. 18 participants from 18 nations. First round: Pentti Hämäläinen def. Martin Smith PTS. Bernard Schroeder def. Paulino Melendez PTS. Second round: Henrik Niedzwiecki def. Leonard Leisching PTS. Tristan Falfan def. Morris White Co. 2. Vladimir Safronov def. Agostino Cosia PTS. Andre de Souza def. Nontasilp Thalianzulp PTS. Shinetsu Suzuki def. Yachit PTS. Thomas Nichols def. Noel Hazard PTS. Jan Zakara def. Dong Hun Chung PTS. Pentti Hämäläinen def. Bernard Schroeder PTS. Quarterfinals: Henrik Niedzwiecki def. Tristan Falfan Co. 1. Vladimir Safronov def. Andre de Souza PTS. Thomas Nichols def. Shinetsu Suzuki PTS. Pentti Hämäläinen def. Jan Zakara PTS. Semi-finals: Vladimir Safronov def. Henrik Niedzwiecki PTS. Thomas Nichols def. Pentti Hämäläinen PTS. Final Vladimir Safronov def. Thomas Nichols, PTS. Lightweight. 18 participants from 18 nations. First round Toshihito Ishimaru def. Thomas Donovan, PTS. Anatoly Lajitko def. Francisco Nunez, PTS. Second round Zygmunt Milevsky def. Pantininivu Ori, PTS. Harry Kurschat def. Celedonio Espinosa, PTS. Luis Molina def. William Griffiths, PTS. Anthony Byrne def. Joseph Chovanec, DSQ3. Andre Verilato def. The Sunbike Co. 2. Richard McTaggart def. Chandrasena Jayus Uriya, PTS. Edward Beatty def. Subchandakov Solya, PTS. Anatoly Lajitko def. Toshihito Ishimaru, PTS. Quarterfinals Harry Kurschat def. Zygmunt Milevsky, Co. 3. Anthony Byrne def. Luis Molina, PTS. Richard McTaggart def. Andre Verilato, PTS. Anatoly Lajitko def. Edward Beatty, PTS. Semi-finals Harry Kurschat def. Anthony Byrne, PTS. Richard McTaggart def. Anatoly Lajitko, PTS. Final Richard McTaggart def. Harry Kurschat, PTS. Light welterweight. 22 participants from 22 nations. First round Konstantin Dumitrescu def. Terence Ung, PTS. Hans Pedersen def. Carlos Rodriguez, PTS. Antonio Marcilla def. Chan Patapongs, Co. 1. Leopold Petezel def. Celestino Pinto, PTS. Franco Nancy def. Raymond Gould, Co. 3. Willie Roth def. Thomas Schuster, PTS. Second round Claude Salutin def. Henry Perry, PTS. Vladimir Yenguibayan def. Leszek Drogosh, PTS. Henry Lubsha def. Leslie Mason, PTS. Joseph Shaw def. Max Carlos, PTS. Hwang Aki Young def. Manuel de los Santos DSQ2. Konstantin Dumitrescu def. Hans Pedersen, PTS. Antonio Marcilla def. Leopold Petezel, PTS. Franco Nancy def. Willie Roth, PTS. Quarterfinals Vladimir Yenguibayan def. Claude Salutin, PTS. Henry Lubsha def. Joseph Shaw, PTS. Konstantin Dumitrescu def. Hwang Aki Young, PTS. Franco Nancy def. Antonio Marcilla, PTS. Semi-finals Vladimir Yenguibayan def. Henry Lubsha, PTS. Franco Nancy def. Konstantin Dumitrescu, PTS. Final Vladimir Yenguibayan def. Franco Nancy, PTS. Welterweight. 16 participants from 16 nations. First round Andres Dori def. Hussein Bate, PTS. Kevin Hogarth def. Graham Finley, PTS. Pierce Allen Lane def. Enrique Tovar, PTS. Fred T8 def. Tadej Walasek, PTS. Nicolas Andre def. Shi Xuanlen, PTS. Nikolai Linka def. Hector Hatch, PTS. Francisco Gelabert def. Walter Kozak, PTS. Nicholas Gargano def. Eduard Borisov, PTS. Quarterfinals Kevin Hogarth def. Andres Dori, PTS. Fred T8 def. Pierce Allen Lane, PTS. Nikolai Linka def. Nicolas Andre, PTS. Nicholas Gargano def. Francisco Gelabert, PTS. Semi-finals Fred T8 def. Kevin Hogarth, PTS. Nikolai Linka def. Nicholas Gargano, PTS. Final Nikolai Linka def. Fred T8, PTS. Light middleweight. 14 participants from 14 nations. First round Boris Nikolov def. Mohammad Safdar PTS. Zbigniew Pietrykowski def. Richard Karpov PTS. Ulrich Kunas def. James Montgomery PTS. John McCormack def. Alexander Webster PTS. Jose Torres def. Peter Reed PTS. Franco Siciani def. Eugene Legrand PTS. Quarterfinals Laszlo Papp def. Alberto Sáenz Co. 3. Zbigniew Pietrykowski def. Boris Nikolov PTS. John McCormack def. Ulrich Kunas Co. 3. Jose Torres def. Franco Siciani PTS. Semi-finals Laszlo Papp def. Zbigniew Pietrykowski PTS. Jose Torres def. John McCormack PTS. Final Laszlo Papp def. Jose Torres PTS. Middleweight. 14 participants from 14 nations. First round Giulio Rinaldi def. Christian Anderson PTS. Gennady Shadkov def. Ralph Hosak PTS. Dieter Wemhona def. Ronald Redrup PTS. Victor Salazar def. Stig Scharlen PTS. Julius Tormer def. Howard Richter PTS. Ramon Tapia def. Zbigniew Piotrkowski Co. 1. Quarterfinals Gilbert Chapron def. Roger Rouse PTS. Gennady Shadkov def. Giulio Rinaldi walkover. Victor Salazar def. Dieter Wemhona PTS. Ramon Tapia def. Julius Tormer Co. 2. Semi-finals Gennady Shadkov def. Victor Salazar Co. 2. Ramon Tapia def. Gilbert Chapron PTS. Final Gennady Shadkov def. Ramon Tapia Co. 1. Light heavyweight. 11 participants from 11 nations. First round Andrei Wojciechowski def. Lenar Risberg Co. 3. Georg Nigria def. Petrus Van Vuren PTS. Ottavio Panunzi def. Gerald Collins PTS. Quarterfinals Romualdas Murauskas def. Anthony Madigan PTS. James Boyd def. Rodolfo Diaz PTS. Carlos Lucas def. Andrei Wojciechowski PTS. Georg Nigria def. Ottavio Panunzi PTS. Semi-finals James Boyd def. Romualdas Murauskas PTS. Georg Nigria def. Carlos Lucas PTS. Final James Boyd def. Georg Nigria PTS. Heavyweight. 11 participants from 11 nations. First round Giacomo Bozzano def. Ilka Koski PTS. Torna Osmin def. Patrick Sharkey Co. 3. Lev Mukin def. Bojko Lozanov Co. 3. Quarterfinals Daniel Becker def. Jose Giorgetti Co. 1. Pete Rademiki def. Joseph Nemec Co. 2. Giacomo Bozzano def. Ulrich Nitschke PTS. Lev Mukin def. Torna Osmin Co. 1. Semi-finals Pete Rademiki def. Daniel Becker Co. 3. Lev Mukin def. Giacomo Bozzano Co. 3. Final Pete Rademiki def.